Hey friends, Miss Rosenfield here. We are going to finish the Odyssey today. So I am reading the whole sort of second section called The Return, which starts on page 595. So this includes Odysseus coming back to Ithaca, the test of the bow, him dealing with the suitors, otherwise called Odysseus' Revenge, Penelope's Test, and the end. So just to review where he's been, remember that he was at the Trojan War in Troy for 10 years. And then the whole first section that we've been reading in class has been 3 years. So all of the different adventures was a pretty short part of the Odyssey. And in that 3 years, a year was spent on Circe's Island. That's who that painting is of, by the way. And then after he leaves the cattle of the sun god, when all his men get killed by Zeus, then he lands on Calypso's island, and he's there for 7 years. When the gods finally tell Calypso to send Odysseus home, he lands in Phaeacia, which is where he was telling this entire story to his friend King Alcinous. Now he's finished telling the story, and we're kind of back in the present day with Odysseus. So as these events are happening to him, we're reading them for the first time. So it's closed the frame of the frame story, and now he is coming back home after 20 years of being gone. So I am on page 595. This painting on this page of our textbook is Athena making Odysseus look extra old by magic. So he does look older probably because it's been 20 years, but she makes him unrecognizable. She makes him look like a beggar so that he can come home sort of stealthily. When another one of the kings, Agamemnon, came home from the Trojan War, his wife had actually taken a new king while he was gone. And when he came home and announced, hey, everybody, I'm Agamemnon, I'm home from the war, they knew it was him because he wasn't secretive about it, and they killed him so that the queen's new man could continue being the king there. So Odysseus is in disguise, partially because he doesn't want that to happen to him, where he gets murdered by someone that Penelope may be with, although we know that Penelope's been faithful, unlike Odysseus. And partially because it was foretold that way, that Polyphemus prayed to Poseidon that Odysseus would not make it home, or if he had to, that it would be under strange sail, meaning not looking like himself or on his own ship. So there is a little bit of summary there that basically just says that Athena catches Odysseus up with everything that's been happening at home, that these suitors have been trying to marry his wife, Penelope, and they've been staying in his castle and eating his sheep and drinking his wine and trying to kill his son, Telemachus, who was trying to find Odysseus. And we pick up actually on page 596 at the top, where Athena is coming down to talk to Odysseus, coming down from Mount Olympus. From the air she walked, taking the form of a tall woman, handsome and clever at her craft, and stood beyond the gate in plain sight of Odysseus, unseen though by Telemachus, unguessed, for not to everyone will gods appear. So Odysseus can see her, but not Telemachus. Odysseus noticed her, so did the dogs, who cowered whimpering away from her. She only nodded, signing to him with her brows, a sign he recognized. Crossing the yard, he passed out through the gate in the stockade to face the goddess. There she said to him, son of Laertes and the gods of old, Odysseus, master of landways and seaways. So there's an epithet, Odysseus, master of landways and seaways. Dissemble to your son no longer now. The time has come. Tell him how you together will bring doom on the suitors in the town. I shall not be far distant then, for I myself desire battle. Saying no more, she dipped her golden wand upon the man, making his cloak pure white, and the knit tunic fresh around him. Lithe and young she made him, ruddy with sun, his jawline clean, the beard no longer gray upon his chin, and she withdrew when she had done. So she's telling him to go talk to his son Telemachus, and she makes him look good for the reunion. Then Lord Odysseus reappeared, and his son was thunderstruck. Fear in his eyes, he looked down and away as though it were a god, and whispered, Stranger, you are no longer what you were just now. Your cloak is new, even your skin. You are one of the gods who rule the sweep of heaven. Be kind to us. We'll make you fair oblation and gifts of hammered gold. Have mercy on us. So he thinks that Odysseus is a god because he didn't see Athena, but he saw him transform. I'm at the top of 597. The noble and enduring man replied, Odysseus, no god, why take me for a god? No, no, I am that father whom your boyhood lacked and suffered pain for lack of. I am he. Held back too long, the tears ran down his cheeks as he embraced his son. Only Telemachus, uncomprehending, wild with incredulity, cried out, you cannot be my father, Odysseus. Meddling spirits conceive this trick to twist the knife in me. No man of woman born could work these wonders by his own craft, unless a god came into it with ease to turn him young or old at will. I swear you were in rags and old, and here you stand like one of the immortals. So Odysseus is crying, and he's saying, you're my son, and I've been gone all this time. And Telemachus is freaked out because he's rightfully scared of the gods, and he says, there's no way you could be a human. I just saw you transform unless a god did that for you. I'm on line 1045. Odysseus brought his raging mind to bear and said, this is not princely, to be swept away by wonder at your father's presence. No other Odysseus will ever come, for he and I are one, the same. His bitter fortune and his wanderings are mine. 20 years gone, and I am back again on my own island. As for my change of skin, that is a charm Athena, hope of soldiers, uses as she will. She has the knack to make me seem a beggar man sometimes, and sometimes young, with finer clothes about me. It is no hard thing for the gods of heaven to glorify a man or bring him low. So he tells him, chill out, it's me, you're being kind of ridiculous, Athena does this, she takes care of me, that's all it is. When he had spoken, down he sat. Then throwing his arms around this marvel of a father, Telemachus began to weep. Salt tears rose from the wells of longing in both men, and cries burst from both as keen and fluttering as those of the great taloned hawk, whose nestlings farmers take before they fly. So helplessly they cried, pouring out tears, and might have gone on weeping so till sundown, had not Telemachus said, dear father, tell me what kind of vessel put you here ashore on Ithaca? Your sailors, who were they? I doubt you made it walking on the sea. So I'm at the top of 598 now. Then said Odysseus, who had borne the barren sea, only plain truth shall I tell you, child. Great seafarers, the Phaeacians, gave me passage as they gave other wanderers. By night over the open ocean, while I slept, they brought me into their cutter, set me down on Ithaca, with gifts of bronze and gold and stores of woven things. By the gods' will, these lie all hidden in a cave. I came to this wild place, directed by Athena, so that we might lay plans to kill our enemies. Count up the suitors for me. Let me know what men are at arms there, how many men. I must put all my mind to it, to see if we two by ourselves can take them on, or if we should look round for help. So Odysseus tells him basically to get him some information about how many suitors are in the castle so that he can attack them. Telemachus replied, O father, all my life your fame as a fighting man has echoed in my ears, your skill with weapons and the tricks of war. But what you speak of is a staggering thing, beyond imagining for me. How can two men do battle with a houseful in their prime? For I must tell you there is no affair of 10 or even twice 10 men, but scores, throngs of them. You shall see, here and now. The number from Dulichium alone is 52 picked men, with armorers, a half dozen. 24 came from Same, 20 from Zacynthus. Our own island accounts for 12, high-ranked in the retainers. Made on the crier and the master harper, besides a pair of handymen at feasts. If we go in against all these, I fear we pay in salt blood for your vengeance. You must think hard if you would conjure up the fighting strength to take us through. So Telemachus tells him, the two of us can't fight all these men. There are too many of them. Odysseus, who had endured the long war in the sea, answered, I'll tell you now. Suppose Athena's arm is over us, and Zeus, her father's. Must I rack my brains for more? So he says, we have the gods on our side. That's all we need. Clear-headed Telemachus looked hard and said, those two are great defenders, no one doubts it. But throned in the serene clouds overhead, other affairs of men and gods they have to rule over. And the hero answered, before long they will stand to right and left of us in combat, in the shouting, when the test comes, our nerve against the suitors in my hall. Here is your part. At break of day tomorrow, home with you. Go mingle with our princes. The swineherd later on will take me down the portside trail, a beggar by my looks, hangdog and old. If they make fun of me in my own courtyard, let your ribs cage up in your springing heart. No matter what I suffer, no matter if they pull me by my heels or practice shots at me to drive me out. Look on, hold down your anger. You may even plead with them by heaven. in gentle terms to quit their horseplay, not that they will heed you, rash as they are, facing their day of wrath. Now fix the next step in your mind. Athena, counseling me, will give me word, and I shall signal to you, nodding. At that point, round up all armor, lances, gear of war left in our hall, and stow the lot away back in the vaulted storeroom. When the suitors miss those arms and question you, be soft in what you say. Answer, I thought I'd move them out of the smoke. They seem no longer those bright arms Odysseus left us years ago when he went off to Troy. Here where the fire's hot breath came, they had grown black and drear. One better reason, too, I had from Zeus. Suppose a brawl starts up when you are drunk. You might be crazed and bloody one another, and that would stain your feast, your courtship. Tempered iron can magnetize a man. Say that. So Odysseus tells Telemachus to put away all the weapons that are in the hall, so that when they attack the suitors, they don't have weapons. And if the suitors ask Telemachus why he's putting them away, say, oh, they look dirty, we should have them cleaned, and also, you're all drunk all the time, what if you get angry and stab each other? We should put them away. I'm on line 1150 on page 600. But put aside 2 broadswords and 2 spears for our own use, 2 ox-hide shields nearby for when we go into action. Pallas Athena and Zeus all-provident, so that's an epithet, Zeus all-provident, will see you through, bemusing our young friends. Now one thing more, if son of mine you are and blood of mine, let no one hear Odysseus is about, neither Laertes nor the swineherd hear, nor any slave, nor even Penelope. But you and I alone must learn how far the women are corrupted. We should know how to locate good men among our hands, the loyal and respectful, and the shirkers who take you lightly, as alone and young. So Odysseus tells Telemachus, don't tell anybody it's me. Keep quiet so I can see who's betrayed me. And he doesn't even trust that Penelope hasn't, which is pretty ironic considering Odysseus has been cheating on Penelope all this time and she has not. So I am on page 600 at Argus, and Argus is a dog. He actually left Argus when he was a puppy, just like Telemachus. So Telemachus and the dog are both about 20 now. While he spoke, an old hound lying near pricked up his ears and lifted up his muzzle. This was Argus, trained as a puppy by Odysseus, but never taken on a hunt before his master sailed for Troy. The young men afterward hunted wild goats with him, and hare and deer, but he had grown old in his master's absence. Treated as rubbish now, he lay at last upon a mass of dung before the gates, manure of mules and cows, piled there until field hands could spread it on the king's estate. Abandoned there and half destroyed with flies, old Argus lay. But when he knew he heard Odysseus' voice nearby, he did his best to wag his tail, nose down, with flattened ears, having no strength to move nearer his master. And the man looked away, wiping a salt tear from his cheek. But he hid this from Eumaeus. So this dog hears Odysseus and recognizes his voice and starts crying and wants to be petted by him. But Odysseus can't give away that that's who he is. So he is crying secretly and says, I marvel that they leave this hound to lie here on the dung pile. He would have been a fine dog from the look of him, though I can't say as to his power and speed when he was young. You find the same good build in house dogs. Table dogs landowners keep all for style. And you replied, Eumaeus, a hunter owned him, but the man is dead in some far place. If this old hound could show the form he had when Lord Odysseus left him, going to Troy, you'd see him swift and strong. He never shrank from any savage thing he brought to bay in the deep woods. On the scent, no other dog kept up with him. Now misery has him in leash. His owner died abroad, and here the women slaves will take no care of him. You know how servants are. Without a master, they have no will to labor or excel. For Zeus, who views the wide world, takes away half the manhood of a man that day he goes into captivity and slavery. So they're talking about how the dog used to be great when he was young, and his master Odysseus, they think, is dead now. And talks about basically how sad it is that no one will take care of him, but admits that the people who were supposed to take care of him are slaves, and that slaves aren't really, you can't expect them to be happy, so it makes sense. Eumaeus crossed the court and went straight forward into the Megaron among the suitors, but death and darkness in that instant closed the eyes of Argus, who had seen his master Odysseus after 20 years. So the dog closes his eyes and dies, like he's satisfied that he's seen Odysseus. It's pretty sad. Okay, page 603, the suitors. So now Odysseus and Telemachus are going to do some more tricky things and then pretty much slaughter everyone. So Odysseus comes to the house, still disguised as an old beggar from Athena. But here Antinous broke in, shouting, God, what evil wind blew in this pest? Get over, stand in the passage. Nudge my table, will you? Egyptian whips are sweet to what you'll come to here, you nosing rat, making your pitch to everyone. These men have bread to throw away on you because it is not theirs. Who cares? Who spares another's food when he has more than plenty? So one of the suitors, whose name is Antinous, is disgusted with Odysseus and is mocking him, even though you shouldn't do that because guests are under the protection of Zeus. But he's basically cocky because he's not in his own house. And he's like, here, we can throw bread away on you because it's not even our bread. With guile, Odysseus drew away, then said, a pity that you have more looks than heart. You'd grudge a pinch of salt from your own larder to your own handyman. You sit here, fat on others' meat, and cannot bring yourself to rummage out a crust of bread for me. Then anger made Antinous' heart beat hard, and glowering under his brows, he answered, now, you think you'll shuffle off and get away after that impudence? Oh, no, you don't. The stool he let fly hit the man's right shoulder on the packed muscle under the shoulder blade, like solid rock for all the effect one saw. Odysseus only shook his head, containing thoughts of bloody work as he walked on, then sat and dropped his loaded bag again upon the door sill. So Antinous threw a stool at him, but because he only looks old, he's actually pretty strong. It doesn't really affect him. Facing the whole crowd, he said and eyed them all, one word only, my lord, and suitors of the famous queen. One thing I have to say. There is no pain, no burden for the heart when blows come to a man, and he defending his own cattle, his own cows and lambs. And we're on the top of page 606 now. And Penelope replied, stranger, my looks, my face, my carriage were soon lost or faded when the Achaeans crossed the sea to Troy. Odysseus, my lord, among the rest. If he returned, if he were here to care for me, I might be happily renowned. But grief instead heaven sent me, years of pain. Sons of the noblest families of the islands, Dulichium, Same, wooded Zacynthus, with native Ithacans are here to court me against my wish, and they consume this house. Can I give proper heed to guest or suppliant or herald on the realm's affairs? How could I, wasted with longing for Odysseus, while here they press for marriage? So she's explaining to this beggar, not knowing that it's Odysseus, that these suitors have been harassing her for years, and she's been waiting for Odysseus and missing him. Ruses served my turn to draw the time out. First, a close-grained web I had the happy thought to set up weaving on my big loom in hall. I said that day, young men, my suitors, now my lord is dead, let me finish my weaving before I marry, or else my thread will have been spun in vain. It is a shroud I weave for Lord Laertes when cold death comes to lay him on his bier. But the country wives would hold me in dishonor if he, with all his fortune, lay unshrouded. So this is what I was telling you a few sections ago, where Penelope tricked them by saying, I'll choose one of you when I'm done weaving this, but she secretly undoes her progress so that she holds them off, pretending to weave, but not actually making any progress on the weaving. I reached their hearts that way, and they agreed. So every day I wove on the great loom, but every night by torchlight I unwove it, and so for 3 years I deceived the Achaeans. But when the seasons brought a 4th year on, as long months waned and the long days were spent, through impudent folly and the slinking maids they caught me, clambered up to me at night. I had no choice then but to finish it, and now, as matters stand at last, I have no strength left to evade a marriage, cannot find any further way. My parents urge it upon me, and my son will not stand by while they eat up his property. He comprehends it, being a man full grown, able to oversee the kind of house Zeus would endow with honor. But you too confide in me. Tell me your ancestry. You were not born of mythic oak or stone. So she's explaining to Odysseus, but she doesn't know it's him, that she's tried so long not to marry anyone else. Her parents are telling her to do it. Her son wants her to do it because he's tired of the suitors eating up all his inheritance, and she is out of ways to avoid it, but she still doesn't want to. So she asked Odysseus to tell her about him, even though she doesn't know it's him. She just thinks he's a beggar, but she's kind to him because that's what you're supposed to do to make Zeus happy. And he pretends to know that Odysseus is going to come home soon to make her feel better. And she says, you see then, he is alive and well, and headed homeward. He says, you see then, he is alive and well, and headed homeward now. No more to be abroad far from his island, his dear wife and son. Here is my sworn word for it. Witness this, God of the zenith, noblest of the gods, and Lord Odysseus' hearthfire, now before me. I swear these things shall turn out as I say. Between this present dark and one day's ebb, after the wane, before the crescent moon, Odysseus will come. So when the suitors are all in this hall, and he's told Penelope Odysseus is going to come home, kind of like wink, wink, because we know that he's already there. Penelope puts out a challenge, and she says, okay, here's what I am going to do to make all of you happy who want to marry me. Odysseus was a very skilled archer, so shooting bow and arrow. And what he used to do, kind of to like impress people, would be to line up 12 axe heads. And in the painting on the slide, you can see they have these holes through the top of them. And he would line them all up in a row, and then he would shoot an arrow through all of them at once, which is like a really impossible thing to do unless you're super master skilled at archery. So she brings out Odysseus's bow, which is so enormous that like people can't even string it themselves, and says, whoever can shoot this arrow through these 12 axe heads like Odysseus did can marry me. And she doesn't know Odysseus is there. And this is another sort of trick of hers because she's hoping that no one will be able to do it. So that's what we call the challenge. And I'm on page 607 at this point. And Odysseus took his time, turning the bow, tapping it, every inch, for borings that termites might have made while the master of the weapon was abroad. The suitors now were watching him, and some jested among themselves, a bow lover, dealer in old bows. Maybe he has one like it at home, or has an itch to make one for himself. See how he handles it, the sly old buzzard. And one disdainful suitor added this, may his fortune grow an inch for every inch he bends it. So the suitors weren't even able to like string his bow, because you need to be pretty strong to bend a bow together to put on the string. So Odysseus, who still looks like an old beggar, asks if he can give it a try, and the suitors are making fun of him because they've already been shamed. They haven't even been able to string the bow, much less shoot it through the axe heads. And I'm on the top of page 608. But the man skilled in all ways of contending, satisfied by the great bow's look and heft, like a musician, like a harper, when with quiet hand upon his instrument he draws between his thumb and forefinger a sweet new string upon a peg. So effortlessly Odysseus in one motion strung the bow, then slid his right hand down the cord and plucked it, so the taut gut vibrating hummed and sang a swallow's note. In the hushed hall it smote the suitors, and all their faces changed. So he strung the bow, and everyone was like, what? Then Zeus thundered overhead, and one loud crack for a sign. And Odysseus laughed within him that the son of crooked-minded Cronus had flung that omen down. He picked one ready arrow from his table where it lay bare. The rest were waiting still in the quiver for young men's turn to come. He knocked it, let it rest across the hand grip, and drew the string and groove butt of the arrow, aiming from where he sat upon the stool. Now flashed arrow from twanging bow clean as a whistle through every socket ring, and grazed not one, to thud with heavy brazen head beyond. So he just picked it up all quiet, let the arrow go, it went through all the axe heads, and everyone is just stunned because he looks like this old beggar and because none of the suitors could even string the bow, much less take the shot. Then quietly Odysseus said, Telemachus, the stranger you welcomed in your hall has not disgraced you. I did not miss, neither did I take all day stringing the bow. Which is like, haha, suitors. My hand and eye are sound, not so contemptible as the young men say. The hour has come to cook their lordships' mutton, supper by daylight. Other amusements later, with song and harping that adorn a feast. He dropped his eyes and nodded, and the prince Telemachus, true son of King Odysseus, belted his sword on, clapped hand to spear, and with a clinking glitter of keen bronze stood by his chair, in the forefront near his father. Okay, so now Odysseus and Telemachus are going to kill everyone. And I am on page 609. The section is called Odysseus' Revenge. Now shrugging off his rags, the wiliest fighter of the islands leapt and stood on the broad doorsill, his own bow in his hand. He poured out at his feet a rain of arrows from the quiver and spoke to the crowd. So much for that. Your clean-cut game is over. Now watch me hit a target that no man has hit before, if I can make this shot. Help me, Apollo. He drew to his fist the cruel head of an arrow for Antinous, just as the young man leaned to lift his beautiful drinking cup, embossed, two-handled, golden. The cup was in his fingers, the wine was even at his lips, and did he dream of death? How could he? In that revelry amid his throng of friends, who would imagine a single foe, though a strong foe indeed, could dare to bring death's pain on him and darkness on his eyes? So he's aiming for Antinous, who is the really rude suitor, and he's like drinking his wine, not knowing that he's about to die. Odysseus's arrow hit him under the chin and punched up to the feathers through his throat, So he shot him right through the throat. Top of page 610. Backward and down he went, letting the wine cup fall from his shocked hand. Like pipes, his nostrils jetted crimson runnels, a river of mortal red, and one last kick upset his table, knocking the bread and meat to soak in dusty blood. So this is some imagery, sensory language describing what his death was like. Now as they craned to see their champion where he lay, the suitors jostled in uproar down the hall, everyone on his feet. Wildly, they turned and scanned the walls in the long room for arms, but not a shield, not a good ashen spear was there for a man to take and throw. So because Telemachus had already moved all the weapons out of the hall, they didn't have anything to defend themselves. All they could do was yell in outrage at Odysseus. Foul, to shoot at a man. That was your last shot. Your own throat will be slit for this. Our finest lad is down. You killed the best on Ithaca. Buzzards will tear your eyes out. For they imagined as they wished that it was a wild shot, an unintended killing. Fools, not to comprehend they were already in the grip of death. So they think it was just a one-off. They don't realize they're all about to die. But glaring under his brows, Odysseus answered, You yellow dogs, you thought I'd never make it home from the land of Troy. You took my house to plunder. You dared bid for my wife while I was still alive. Contempt was all you had for the gods who rule wide heaven. Contempt for what men say of you hereafter. Your last hour has come. You die in blood. As they took all this in, sickly green fear pulled at their entrails, and their eyes flickered, looking for some hatch or hideaway from death. Eurymachus alone could speak. He said, If you are Odysseus of Ithaca, come back. All that you say these men have done is true. Rash actions, many here, more in the countryside. But here he lies, the man who caused them all. Antinous was the ringleader. He whipped us on to do these things. He cared less for a marriage than for the power Cronion has denied him as king of Ithaca. For that he tried to trap your son and would have killed him. He is dead now and has his portion. Spare your own people. As for ourselves, we'll make restitution of wine and meat consumed, and add, each one, a tithe of 20 oxen and with gifts of bronze and gold to warm your heart. Meanwhile, we cannot blame you for your anger. So someone is saying, listen, if you really are Odysseus, you killed the ringleader. Antinous was the one who kind of like stirred us all up to action on all of this. He didn't even really want to marry Penelope so much as he wanted the power. Spare the rest of us and we'll pay back everything we ate plus some. But Odysseus is not into that. I'm on line 1464 on page 611. Odysseus glowered under his black brows and said, Not for the whole treasure of your fathers, all you enjoy, lands, flocks, or any gold put up by others, would I hold my hand. There will be killing till the score is paid. You forced yourselves upon this house. Fight your way out or run it if you think you'll escape death. I doubt one man of you skins by. They felt their knees fail and their hearts, but heard Eurymachus for the last time rallying them. Friends, he said, the man is implacable. Now that he's got his hands on bow and quiver, he'll shoot from the big doorstone there until he kills us to the last man. Fight, I say. Let's remember the joy of it. Swords out. Hold up your tables to deflect his arrows. After me, everyone. Rush him where he stands. If we can budge him from the door, if we can pass into the town, we'll call out men to chase him. This fellow with his bow will shoot no more. So he's saying, all right, let's fight him. He drew his own sword as he spoke, a broadsword of fine bronze, honed like a razor on either edge. Then, crying hoarse and loud, he hurled himself at Odysseus. But the kingly man let fly an arrow at that instant, and the quivering feathered butt sprang to the nipple of his breast as the barb stuck in his liver. The bright broadsword clanged down. He lurched and fell aside, pitching across his table. His cup, his bread and meat were spilt and scattered far and wide, and his head slammed on the ground. Revulsion, anguish in his heart, with both feet kicking out, he downed his chair, while the shrouding wave of mist closed on his eyes. So he got an arrow straight through his body. Amphinomus now came running at Odysseus, broadsword naked in his hand. He thought to make the great soldier give way at the door, but with a spear throw from behind Telemachus hit him between the shoulders, and the lance head drove clear through his chest. He left his feet and fell forward, thudding, forehead against the ground. Telemachus swerved around him, leaving the long dark spear planted in Amphinomus. If he paused to yank it out, someone might jump him from behind or cut him down with a sword at the moment he bent over. So he ran from the tables to his father's side and halted, panting, saying, Father, let me bring you a shield and spear, a pair of spears, a helmet. I can arm on the run myself. I'll give outfits to Eumaeus and this cowherd. Better to have equipment. So Telemachus is killing guys, telling Odysseus he'll go get him a helmet and more weapons. Said Odysseus, "Run then, while I hold them off with arrows as long as the arrows last. When all are gone, if I'm alone, they can dislodge me." I'm in the middle of 6:12 now. Quick upon his father's word, Telemachus ran to the room where spears and armor lay. He caught up 4 light shields, 4 pairs of spears, 4 helms of war high plumed with flowing manes, and ran back, loaded down to his father's side. He was the first to put a helmet on and slide his bare arm in a buckler strap, so for a shield. He's got a helmet and a shield. The servants armed themselves, and all 3 took their stand beside the master of battle. So now they have 3 servants with them. There's 5 of them. While he had arrows, he aimed and shot, and every shot brought down one of his huddling enemies. But when all barbs had flown from the bowman's fist, he leaned his bow in the bright entryway beside the door and armed. A 4-ply shield hard on his shoulder and a crested helm, horse-tailed, nodding stormy upon his head. Then took his rough and bronze-shod spears. So then Athena comes and helps him kill all the suitors. I'm at the top of 6:13 now. And Odysseus looked around him, narrow-eyed, for any others who had lain hidden while death's black fury passed. In blood and dust he saw that crowd all fallen, many and many slain. Think of a catch that fishermen haul into a half-moon bay in a fine mesh net from the whitecaps of the sea. How all are proud out on the sand in throes for the salt sea, twitching their cold lives away in Helios' fiery air. So lay the suitors heaped on one another. So this is a metaphor. He's describing when fishermen bring in a net of fish and they're kind of flopping on the ground because they're dying. That's what the suitors all looked like. Pretty brutal. Okay, so now we're at Penelope's Test, which is on page 613. And Penelope sees that Odysseus looks like Odysseus, but it's been 20 years. It's kind of weird that he looks the same, and she doesn't trust that this isn't a trick from the gods since they've caused so much suffering to her and her family. So she's very intelligent, like we know. So what she does is she has this little test for Odysseus so that she can tell whether it is him or someone pretending to be him. I'm on page 613 under Penelope's Test, line 1540. Great-hearted Odysseus, home at last, was being bathed now by Eurynomy and rubbed with golden oil, and clothed again in a fresh tunic and cloak. Athena lent him beauty, head to foot. She made him taller and massive, too, with crisping hair and curls like petals of wild hyacinth, but all red golden. There's a simile comparing Odysseus made him look extra beautiful, made his hair look like hyacinth flowers. Think of gold infused on silver by a craftsman, whose fine art Hephaestus taught him, or Athena, one whose work moves to delight. Just so she lavished beauty over Odysseus' head and shoulders. He sat then in the same chair by the pillar, facing his silent wife, and said, "Strange woman, the immortals of Olympus made you hard, harder than any. Who else in the world would keep aloof as you do from her husband if you returned to her from years of trouble, cast on his own land in the 20th year? Nurse, make up a bed for me to sleep on. Her heart is iron in her breast." So Odysseus is saying, why aren't you coming to me and hugging me, and why aren't you happy to see me? I don't understand why you're being so weird. And he tells a servant to make him up a bed so that he doesn't have to sleep in their bedroom together. Penelope spoke to Odysseus now. She said, "Strange man, if man you are, this is no pride on my part, nor scorn for you, not even wonder merely. I know so well how he appeared boarding the ship for Troy. But all the same, make up his bed for him, Euryclea. Place it outside the bedchamber my lord built with his own hands. Pile the big bed with fleeces, rugs, and sheets of purest linen." So this is the test that Penelope is laying out for Odysseus, because there's a secret that only the two of them know, which is that when they, were building their castle, there was an olive tree where their bedroom is now. And Odysseus cut the tree down so that there was still a stump above the ground. And then he made a bed around that stump. So the stump was one of the bedposts. And the other bedposts are like even with it. And then he built the castle around that bed. So it looks like a normal bed, but one of the posts for the bed actually still has roots in the ground from being a tree. So it is impossible to move it. But the only people who know this are Penelope and Odysseus. So she tells the servant to move his bed outside the bedroom. And she knows that if the person who hears this is fine with it, then it's not really Odysseus because the bed can't be moved. But Odysseus is really there, and he knows the secret of the bed, that it used to be a tree and that there are still roots in the ground. And he gets really angry and he's like, how could you move my bed? Did you cut it down? And that's how she knows that it's really him, because only the two of them know that that bed shouldn't be able to be moved. So I am on page 614, line 1570. With this, she tried him to the breaking point, and he turned on her in a flashing rage. Woman, by heaven, you've stung me now. Who dared to move my bed? No builder had the skill for that, unless a god came down to turn the trick. No mortal in his best days could budge it with a crowbar. There is our pact and pledge, our secret sign built into that bed, my handiwork and no one else's. An old trunk of olive grew like a pillar on the building plot, and I had laid out our bedroom round that tree, lined up the stone walls, built the walls and roof, gave it a doorway and smooth-fitting doors. Then I lopped off the silvery leaves and branches, hewed and shaped that stump from the roots up into a bedpost, drilled it, let it serve as model for the rest. I planed them all, inlaid them all with silver, gold, and ivory, and stretched a bed between, a pliant web of oxhide thongs dyed crimson. There's our sign. I know no more. Could someone else's hand have sawn that trunk and dragged the frame away? So he's telling her that he knows about the bed and he's angry because he thinks someone has moved it and ruined it. Their secret. As she heard it told, her knees grew tremulous and weak. Her heart failed her. With eyes brimming tears, she ran to him, throwing her arms round his neck, and kissed him, murmuring, top of page 616 now. Do not rage at me, Odysseus. No one ever matched your caution. Think what difficulty the gods gave us. They denied us life together in our prime and flowering years, kept us from crossing into age together. Forgive me, don't be angry. I could not welcome you with love on sight. I armed myself long ago against the frauds of men, impostors who might come, and all those many whose underhanded ways bring evil on. But here and now, what sign could be so clear as this of our own bed? No other man has ever laid eyes on it. Only my own slave, Actorus, that my father sent with me as a gift. She kept our door. You make my stiff heart know that I am yours. So she tells him that she was just waiting to make sure that it was him, and that she's happy he's home. Now from his breast into his eyes the ache of longing mounted, and he wept at last, his dear wife, clear and faithful in his arms. Not that he was faithful. Longed for as the sun-warmed earth is longed for by a swimmer spent in rough water where his ship went down under Poseidon's blows, gale winds and tons of sea. So this is a simile comparing being able to come home to Penelope at last, like someone finally leaving the ocean after thinking that they were going to drown. Few men can keep alive through a big surf to crawl, clotted with brine on kindly beaches in joy, knowing the abyss behind. And so she too rejoiced, her gaze upon her husband, her white arms round him pressed as though forever. All right, and then to end the story, our textbook kind of leaves this out. But basically, Odysseus is still angry about all the things that the suitors have done. And he wants to fight. The families of the suitors want to fight him because he killed their sons. And he killed their fathers because he took the older generation to the Trojan War. And then he slaughtered this entire younger generation at home. So Odysseus has killed 2 generations of men on Ithaca. And the families are angry and want to fight him. And he wants to fight them too. But Athena comes down and declares that there be peace on the island. And there's no arguing with Athena, so that's what happens. And eventually Odysseus goes inland and offers that sacrifice to Poseidon that he was told to do by Tiresias in the land of the dead. And he lives a long life. And sort of the closing of the story is that because he made that sacrifice and pleased the gods, then his story was allowed to be told. And we're still telling it today. So congratulations on finishing the Odyssey. We ended on page 616. Good job.